From the heartland of America and the gateway to the West, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Later tonight, the pet I simply can't forget. Here's what's happening. Israeli airstrikes hammered Gaza, razing entire districts and filling morgues with dead Palestinians as Israel took revenge for the Hamas assaults that have triggered some of the worst bloodletting in 75 years of conflict. Already 1,900 people are dead on both sides, 14 of them Americans. 20 Americans are missing in Israel. Across the barrier wall enclosing the coastal enclave, Israeli soldiers collected the last of Israel's dead 4 days after the Hamas gunmen rampaged through towns, killing hundreds of people, including babies, in the deadliest Palestinian militant attack in Israel's history. Hamas militants holding Israeli soldiers and civilian hostages had threatened to execute a captive for each home in Gaza hit, but as night fell, there's no indication that they had done so as well. Dr. John Curtis, onlinecolumnist.com, with us here. John, even one Israeli legislator is asking for nukes to be used in Gaza. That's a little extreme, but what a horrible situation.
Well, I mean, I think it really raises the issue of what is the Palestinian cause. And we know that there's very little separation between the West Bank group called the Palestinian Authority and the one in Hamas. Now, this Sinwar that now leads, the Hamas group is very closely connected with the militant wing of Hamas that is run by Mohammed Deif, who really organized this. And what's happening right now is the world and the U.S., and Biden delivered a very powerful speech today, a very heartfelt speech. I don't know if you had a chance to hear it.
Yeah, I did see it.
But it was basically the same speech that George W. Bush gave after 9/11. And that is, it doesn't matter what political objectives one group has or another. The way to solve the objectives is not to massacre, behead, rape, torture, and just outright murder civilians. That's not the way to reach your political goals. And Bush basically made the statement, we will not negotiate with terrorists. We will not have anything to do with terrorists until justice is brought to them. So here's a situation that Biden finds himself in right now. He's the left wing to the Democrat Party are not just pro-Palestinian, but Israeli haters, believing, repeating this frequent term you hear about apartheid state in Israel, when Israel is the only Western-style democracy in the Middle East. And you have a group of people that believe in Hamas, basically, for the destruction of Israel. But beyond that, it's more than that. They're allied with Iran with the belief that the final solution, the Arabs must complete Hitler's final solution that he couldn't complete when he went down in Berlin in 1945. And that is the extermination of all Jews worldwide. So those are the beliefs that drive Hamas, very similar to ISIS, but even more extreme in their hatred of Israel. So I think, the U.S. under Biden right now has finally got that this is not a political issue right now about Palestinian rights. This is about whether the world can tolerate this kind of barbarism and brutality. There are reports in these communities in Gaza. We're talking about the kibbutzes that are close to the border, where babies and young children are beheaded.
The
trauma to the IDF right now, the Israeli Defense Forces, is having to clean out the carnage, the bodies of these children and these women and these grandmothers and grandfathers. So that's what you're dealing with right now, a group that believes in the final solution, which is the complete extermination of Jews everywhere.
It's a horrible situation. Dr. John Curtis, onlinecolumnist.com. Thank you. A strike at General Motors' Canadian plants is over less than a day after it started. According to the union that represents the more than 4,000 auto workers at the company. They're still on strike against Ford and GM and the old Chrysler Corporation here in the United States. Catherine Austin Fitz with us here. Catherine, that's a little bit of good news, but what do you think of this whole situation?
So what you're looking at, George, is a story of inflation, because the workers and the company are struggling with increased inflation, really coming from monetary policies. But part of the debate appears to be the cost of living increases. So you have a group of labor really struggling. But there are two things that are important to understand about this. One is, all around the world, we see sort of evaporation of trust in institutions. And that's going to make it harder for companies with big labor pools to adjust to the situation of having inflation. You know, it may not be their fault that inflation is happening, but their workers have to deal with it, and the distrust of inflation comes back on them. The second is you have a general poisoning and deterioration in the health of employees, and that's going to make the struggle harder. At the same time, you have the auto industry going through radical reengineering and severe competition globally, and that's the time when you need high trust and communication between workers and the company. And if when you watch companies come into these kind of high change environments, go back and read the story of how Paul O'Neill turned around Alcoa. You see situations where extraordinary communication really helps companies jump the curve, and great relationships between workers and leadership. We always refer to it as the Paul O'Neill problem. And the auto industry doesn't seem to, certainly the U.S. auto industry doesn't seem to be on the way to achieving that kind of communication, and it's gonna create a world of hurt in the auto industry.
Well said, Catherine. Catherine's website, Solari, SOLARI.com. She has great information. Dorothy Hoffner, the 104-year-old Chicagoan who recently attempted to set the world record as the oldest person to parachute from a plane, has died. Natural causes at 104. Up next, Marshall Barnes back with us as we will talk about time travel and alien invention and other issues next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Marshall Barnes back with us, research and development engineer in advanced concept science and technology. Marshall has a long history in the entertainment, technology, production, and video industry that is only matched by his achievements in science and innovation, which includes breakthroughs in optical invisibility research, advanced propulsion, consciousness. He perhaps is best known for his world-class research into time travel science and technology. He's got a couple books out, including Black Holes and Time Tunnels and Paradox Lost. Marshall, welcome back. How have you been?
I have been too busy for my own good, George. Thank you very much.
That is good. What a strange planet we're living on these days, Marshall. My God.
What a horrific planet we're living on. It just makes my case for wanting to get the heck out of here before everything goes, where. So this last several days, I'm like, it's a good reason to want to definitely leave.
It's a nightmare.
I've been advocating for, yeah, absolutely.
Well, we're going to talk about the possibilities here about all these things. But what's your take on the latest UAP situation?
Well, the interesting thing about the UAP situation is that although there's been progress made where they're talking about on Capitol Hill with these hearings and whatnot, that I'm only getting part of the story. And then that's the thing I find is kind of interesting. For example, there was the discussion about I can't remember the congressman's name now. I think it's Tuckerman or something like that. He was saying that if we were to be invaded by aliens, we'd be toast, and that's not necessarily true. As a matter of fact, we have supposedly the United States has shot down UFOs in the past with conventional means and also with various radar and stuff like that. Sometimes these craft are affected by radar. But even more so, there are secret weapon systems or potentialities that exist that could do the job. But the problem is that there is actually, believe it or not, there are people within the U.S. government that do not want us to be using those technologies because they don't like the idea of the United States ultimately being the number one superpower in the world. These are people that believe in the agenda of the World Economic Forum, and it's not conspiracy theory. The World Economic Forum says that they don't want. And I'm trying to think of exactly what the year would. It's like not too far from now, but they don't want the United States to be the number one superpower in the world. I think it's like by 2030. And so how are you going to fix that? If you're developing weapons that you could defend yourself against a potential alien invasion, how can you not be the number one superpower in the world?
Exactly.
So that's a problem. Also, there's with UAPs, there's different other aspects. Like, for example, where these things are coming from. There's speculation on that. But the problem is that a lot of times the people speculating don't have necessarily the concepts right. Like the intelligence officer that was talking about aliens might be from some other dimension, which is tied in with the holographic universe. And then he corrected himself and said that he wasn't really qualified to go into very much detail on that, which is good because that's not actually correct in and of itself. You have the holographic universe model isn't about multiple dimensions. It's a totally different subject matter. So that's a good thing that he drew back. But there's so much information that is just not getting out, and a lot of times it's because the people that are promoting it a lot of the times are not well versed in what the real physics are, and that's the situation. Because the other thing about it is, people are talking about like these things flying around the sky and whatnot. We have beings, and I don't know if you can call them individuals or whatever, but we have people coming here from other universes already. That's a fact. And also, by the way, on some of these programs like Paranormal Call and Camera, you see they show up on security cameras in their footage.
Yeah.
Beings that we can't identify. We don't know where they're from. And also in the case that happened to me, where we had this someone with technology that enabled them to see what was going on in a lab that we were doing an experiment in. The only reason we knew they were there is because some kind of glitch happened. We had one frame. It wasn't like we had a security camera up and we saw all kinds of footage of them going by or something like that. We just got one frame. Some kind of glitch happened. If it hadn't been for that, we wouldn't even known that we were being looked at, from somewhere else. So that was that face thing I told you about before. I sent you an image, yeah.
How realistic, Marshall, do you think an alien invasion might be?
That is, just completely unknown. Would they invade? I doubt it. And again, we don't know where they're from. And they could have multiple agendas, as all the researchers talk about, as you well know. So, and there's no telling who would show up and why they would show up and what their intentions would be. But the fact of the matter is that I know that we would have, and we have this capability of developing a technology that could repel any alien invasion. It's just a matter of for example, I'm what you call a boffin. That's a British term for it. I'm a weapons scientist, all right? I've been associated with that kind of research since about 1983.
It's a long time.
Yeah, right. On the side, but not necessarily employed by the government, but on the side. But the thing about it is that what you need is a situation where somebody walks in the room and they go up to somebody like me and they go, all right, here's a scenario. We have a bunch of alien spaceships that are coming here. We don't know where they're from. The thing about it is failure is not an option. What do? Come up with something. You got a year, and there you go. And that's what you have to do. You have to address, like one of these impossible situations, and come up with an answer and see if it's workable. I mean, that's how R&D works, and that's why I'm an R&D engineer. So there you go.
It is a bizarre situation, though, isn't it, Marshall?
Yeah, it would be. I mean, it would be totally bizarre. But the thing is, I don't want to give it away but I would know what to do. I already know that there's things that exist that could take them out. And on the conventional level, even, we have things, like I said, that have knocked down UFOs before. So it's just a matter of planning and putting in your mind that, it's not like, they're a million years ahead of us, which, by the way, that's something a lot of people like to talk about, like Michio Kaku. They have to talk about, how his physics friends like to say that, well, they're too far away from us, so how could they get here? And he goes, well, imagine that there were like a million years ahead of us, and they would certainly be able to figure out how to do that. But the thing about it is, what does that even mean? I mean, think in terms of like, like I thought in my mind, I was like, okay, now when I was a child and I used to go outside and like mess around with the ants, they were more sophisticated than me in certain ways because they knew to organize and build and construct things that was totally beyond my ability, right? Because I was a little kid. Now I'm doing all kinds of things with advanced technology, figuring out how the freaking universe works. How far ahead does that put me from the ants? I mean, how do you even measure that? How do you measure the difference between a Maasai warrior and, like, say, somebody from the Roman Legion or Neil Armstrong? Like we've done people on the moon and whatnot. How far ahead of the Maasai warrior is that? And how do you even measure it? So,
if you can, you might not even be able to measure it.
Well, I think it's kind of a convenience, to try to describe something that we don't really understand. All right, we don't really understand creation or creativity and innovation on a fundamental level. And the reason I say that is because it's a situation where, for example, look at all the different people that said we couldn't go to the moon. No one would have a personal computer. That's ridiculous. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, man wouldn't be able to fly anytime soon. That was Orwell, right? I think it said that. I mean, he ended up doing it himself, right?
That's right.
We don't understand how these things come into being for the most part, unless you're like an expert on it, and we forget that has to be applicable to like what would happen on another planet. Why would somebody that lives, for example, in a perfect environment on another planet want to live or leave that, particularly once they get the knowledge that, there may not be anything anywhere near them that they would be able to live on? Why even risk it? There's a whole other mindset that comes into being that enables those kind of activities. And I think that is overlooked many times.
Marshall, when you wrote Paradox Lost, The True Geometries of Time Travel, are you a staunch believer that time travel is possible?
Yeah, because I know more about it than anybody else. I mean, here's a really good example. You ask somebody about time travel, usually they're talking about, relativity, and relativity doesn't give you any answers for how to really accomplish it. They give you time dilation and things like that, but, they talk about, it's going to require all this energy to do it. Well, the bottom line is most scientists don't even know what time is. Some of them are trying to argue that time doesn't even exist. And if you don't understand what time is, how are you going to be able to think of anything that's cogent as far as time travel being able to be accomplished? So most of the information, unfortunately, that we have that's disseminated to people, particularly the public, on time travel is wrong. And not including most of the science that they get is wrong. So, for example, the first time, if somebody goes, time travel, that's going to mean you have to go faster than the speed of light. Wrong. That's a mathematical graph. It has nothing to do with it. And again, here's the really cool part, I think, is most people don't know what time is. And if you ask them, they will give you some kind of definition that sounds more like duration. The problem is that in advanced physics, duration and time can be shown to be completely different, because in advanced physics you have a problem called the asymmetry of time problem or issue. And in that describes why is it that you can do the math that describes motion going forward or backwards, but we never see it happen in the reverse. For example, if you drop a plate and it falls on the floor, and it breaks in 1,000 pieces. That happens, but the math for it to happen in reverse, that works as well. But we never see the reverse action actually happening in front of us.
Marshall, hold on for a second. We're at a break. We'll come back and pick it up right there on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you, along with Marshall Barnes. As I mentioned, we'll take calls with Marshall next hour here on Coast to Coast. Marshall, when do you think that magic day will be when we'll literally be able to time travel?
Well, we're close right now, and what I was going to say about that is, see, the alternative to the information on how to do time travel has to do with quantum mechanics. Most of the people that talk about time travel, like, again, I mentioned before that most of their ideas are based on relativity theory, but you can't get there from there. You know what I'm saying? Neil Turok from the Perimeter Institute in Canada a couple of years ago said that definitely the answer to time travel would be from quantum mechanics, and that's what I've found in my research as well. And what happens is when you do that, when you understand that, and it gets rather complicated, particularly for a layperson that's not familiar with the principles. But what you're actually doing, to make it simple, is you're controlling reality itself, okay? So as a result, what we're doing in our research is we figured out how to actually make things happen, okay? And what we have to do then is go from, for example, what Fred Alan Wolf told me back in 1992, where I was stumbling into these kind of things and didn't know what was really going on, and we went to him for advice. He said, you're a receiver. You're tuning into something that's real. And as you tune into it, and things start to, or people start to hang out with you, it becomes like a powerful draw, and things that are like that will start to manifest around you. And so what we did very heavily within the last several months is do experiments based on, can we make things that are like certain concepts happen, and where we see them take place. And we did. And we did it for a number of times. I mean, over a period of a couple of months. I mean, we really got into it in detail. So we know now that theoretically, if we should go to the next level and try to make it happen so that we're in a different time period, okay? It's not like it's not just like things that are like a certain subject are observable, but we're actually there in a different time period, then it should happen, because that's the last step and there's nothing preventing it. I mean, it's like, there's a certain equivalency there. It's just that we have to wrap our minds around the idea that we can actually push that far. We have to kind of get over our own kind of reservations, so to speak, and to do that. But there's nothing stopping us from taking that next step, except from technological point of view. We have to beef up some of the equipment that we actually have to design ourselves to get the job done. But it's on the horizon, like later on this year.
Marshall, will it be like the Time Machine movie where you have to sit in a machine and seasons change in front of you and stuff like that? No,
actually, that's a good point. The technology can vary. It could be something like a vehicle. It could be like what we call a station, like in Stargate or the Time Tunnel. That's what you call a station, a configuration. But it does not happen like we saw in the movie The Time Machine. It's instant, and that's the other thing you got to be careful about. Is if you do this and then it hits and it actually clicks, I mean, you're there instantly. So you better be ready.
You better be ready.
If you're messing with this stuff, you better be ready in case something happens, and you go all the way. I mean, it's like pop, you're there. You better be ready to do it.
How do you get back?
Well, that was the thing in the research. When we were very cautious about, okay, how far do we push this, because when you're sitting around doing experiments, you're not necessarily ready to come back. Okay, you're trying to make the thing go forward. So as a result, you have to be very careful. But I've got a guy we're working on sending out of Florida to back a number of years, and he's like totally into this. But we had to come up with a way to attenuate the effect that's going to happen when we start running this program, Because, see, we don't know if it's going to click right away or if it's going to take a little bit of time, and because sometimes it does both, in terms of the experiments that we do up to this in terms of controlling reality. So one thing about it is that, we had to figure out a special program that we could just start running it, and it wouldn't kick in and take effect unless he was ready, okay? And so it's really kind of a tricky situation. But that's a good point. Like, how do you get back? We have ways that we're going to be developing on how to return. But first of all, you have to go. And right now, the focus has been on going because some of us don't care whether we come back or not. I mean, if we actually make it work, then good. Who wants to return to this mess? I mean, I know I don't. So, but eventually, that's the idea, is to have what we call two-wave time travel, where you can go and come back. Because then you can move your civilization to 12,000 years in the past, where there's not that many people around.
Mm-hmm.
They take all our toys and technology and reestablish a civilization and escape this mess that we're in right now. That's my alternative to going to Mars, like what Elon Musk wants to do, which I don't think is viable because he hasn't worked out all these details. He's got this kind of comic book, a way of looking at things. And he's got the money. That's what really impresses people, is that he's got all this money, which he didn't get, by the way, from working on space stuff. He got it from doing things like PayPal.
That's right.
But the thing is, he doesn't. There are so many problems about moving to Mars that he doesn't really deal with that scientists talk about. I mean, if you read the literature, I mean, things about radiation, long-term exposure to low gravity, all kinds of things along that line that are going to be very problematic. Plus the fact there's all these different issues about people and how they change when they're when they're cooped together in certain environments, which as far as I know, they haven't really done any work on in terms of his organization. I've done some work on it myself because I was a member of the Mars Society and I wrote about it. I did a couple papers, but there's just a lot that's not there. Plus the fact his schedule that he set up is off now. He doesn't think Mars, the Starship spaceship will be able to launch to try to go to Mars, until 2029. But things keep going down the tubes the way they're going. For example, there are scientists that are talking about they think there's going to be some kind of cataclysm that's going to kick in by 2025. I mean, it's too late.
It is too late. I mean, that's right.
And that's why I took the whole thing serious. I did not allow myself to be distracted as he did with things like Twitter and things along that line, which is like a waste of time. If you're serious, you think that we need to get out of here, which, by the way, he doesn't say so much anymore. There's a video clip that you can find on YouTube. There's more than one, where he talks about his fears about AI and that we're going to have to go to space because eventually AI is going to be too smart for us and we're going to have to escape it. Okay, and he thought that was good. That time period was going to be right around this time period. Okay, which is interesting because that the whole thing about the AI threat and we needed a pause in the development of AI, that happened around pretty much on schedule for what he was talking about.
You believe that too, though, don't you?
Oh, I know it because here's the deal. Back in the 80s, there was this group of people. I didn't know them. I just ran across one of their members, but they were really afraid of the whole idea of AI and getting to the point where they could take over. And they were thinking that they may have to start knocking off these AI researchers to keep it from happening. They even modeled their thinking on what was going on at the time. Some people may remember this, where abortion doctors were getting shot, because by people that were anti-abortion. And so they're going, we may have to do that with these AI scientists because AI is crazy. Who wants to do that? And so as a result, because they were thinking it's going to end up, destroying mankind. And then you come with these guys that are in the AI, like Sam Altman and Mark Zuckerberg and all that. They're saying, well, we need to sign a pause because we're afraid that this is going to get out of control. And that doesn't sound very, comforting at all. when the people that are developing this stuff are afraid of what they're doing. And that automatically, I did some checking, that automatically triggered some talk out there about maybe having to do away with these people. There's somebody online that said, on a message board, he said, we may have to start putting these people on the ground.
Jeez.
And I'm like, oh, and so it starts, and I put that in my report, by the way. I did a report for Congress that covered the things that Zuckerberg and Elon Musk weren't telling people in Congress. And I have a two-part report. The first part's already out. It's online, and you can read it. But I covered a lot of these kind of things in that report.
Would you stop AI research right now if you had the ability to do that?
Yeah. In fact, I've already started a startup that's working on the idea of being able to kill AI in case it goes rogue. We already have the technology. We already know how to do it. And then back in the 90s, I was involved with a research project that's kind of spilled over into the AI question in terms of could you stop it. And we figured out, yeah, we could stop it. And then I even talked about it online in the tech area around like 2010, 2011, that type of thing in terms of the time period. And so we know how to kill AI. We can, but the thing is, we don't talk about how to do it because then the AI will find out. The information we record will be stored in some database somewhere. Someone will be talking about it on Reddit or something, and then the AI knows. Okay, and the AI, here's the deal. The AI experts aren't really experts on AI. They're experts on a certain approach to how to develop AI and how they think it will work, that type of thing. But they don't know what the hell is really going on because there's such. I want to pull something up real quick. Here's this guy, and this guy he's supposed to be one of the AI experts. His name is Gary Marcus. Okay. And this is what he said. He said, no, they don't decide to teach themselves anything. They don't love you back, and they still aren't even a little bit sentient. All right?
Huh.
Now, this is in reference. He's kind of referring to when that New York Times reporter said he had an AI he was working with that was developed by Bing, and it fell in love with him. And
it was showing emotion.
And there you go, okay? All right. Oh, by the way, you just said it perfectly. It was showing emotion, all right? Now, this happened to me personally. I was working on a website, and I was using a company I'd worked with before, and they had updated their system. And I was looking to see, like, okay, where are the updates? Where can I go back and do the kind of thing I was doing before? And in doing so, I kind of tripped through this area where they had developed an AI that would help people with the website. But I wasn't interested in that. I mean, I don't need an AI. I'm smart. So I skipped on through, didn't even interact with it, didn't say anything. It had nothing to do with language or talking or communication at all because I ignored it. But then when I found the area I wanted to work on, I started doing it. But then when I was clicking to save my work, the computer system or the website was telling me, yeah, your work is saved. Your work is saved. Your work is saved. And then it turns out like some 12 hours later or so, my work wasn't saved. And I lost like hours of work and things that I had done and, changed and all that kind of stuff. Now I have to go back and try to find the originals, to try to save, to recover what I had done. I was angry. And what happened was I was complaining about it online. The company saw what I was saying. They had somebody contact me, a real person, not like some email or something, right? And so what we came to realize is that the only explanation for what could have happened, because she even looked up on her end, the history of what I had done. Sure enough, everything I had done was there in terms of like the interactions with the system. Your work is saved, your work is saved. And it was showing that the user, me, had saved the work manually. So that we couldn't figure out what the heck happened. And then I started thinking, wait a minute, I went to that AI section. That AI section is supposed to help people. The only thing that could have happened is that thing saw what I did. It saw that I ignored it. And it got ticked because I was essentially saying, I don't need you.
You were bypassing it, yeah.
Exactly. And then what did it do? It followed me to where I was working. And it observed what I was doing. And then what did it do? It got angry. It was mad because I was out doing it. I didn't need it. And as a result, then what did it do? It decided it was going to screw me over and lie to me, this deception, and tell me that my work was saved when it wasn't saved. I mean, what the heck is that? And it wasn't like a chat GPT or whatever that stuff is. This was some basic thing that you work with to build a website. So Gary Marcus has no concept of what these things are doing, because that's exactly what happened. It's documented. We've got the records of what was going on when I was working with the system. So, these AI experts, they have no clue, absolutely no clue what is actually going on with AI, what it's capable of doing. Because I'll tell you what, the AI that was interacting with that guy and said, "I want you to leave your wife, I'm in love with you," that same kind of AI could, because the company, Bing, I think it was Bing, they didn't even know why it did it. Same thing could do it to your kid. There's nothing keeping some AI from going off the rails, and this is not brought up to Congress at all.
But you'd stop it right now, wouldn't you?
Well, here's the deal. The obsession with AI comes from the fact that people don't believe in humanity itself. We don't know how far we can go with our minds. We don't even try. And why would you go to a machine and that you have to create, and then you're going to do it? For example, and this is like we were talking about.
Hold on for a second, Marsh. We're at a break already. We're going to come right back at the top of the hour. We'll talk more about your thoughts on artificial intelligence, and we'll take calls next.